Welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast, everyone. We have an amazing guest on today. His name is Shay Swenson, and I'm going to give his little intro. That is not just a little intro. He grew up in Blanding, Utah, and as a managing partner and founder member of the Stonebriar Wealth Advisors, he is a registered financial consultant and helps his clients find tax and risk efficient retirement, and he builds legacy solutions for their families, which, that's a good reason to be on here already,
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
And Shay's biggest endeavor, however, have been in his philanthropy efforts and giving back to the community and those that he serves, which we'll dive into that as well.
Sure.
And so he's founded the Swenson Foundation in honor of his grandparents who raised him. The Swenson Foundation gives leadership awards and scholarships in the Blanding, Utah community where Shay grew up. He also launched his second nonprofit with his partners called the Stonebriar Foundation, whose mission is to find solutions to fight the lack of financial literacy plaguing our society. He's been nationally recognized by major publications like Forbes, Wealth Insider, and New York Today. And we are extremely honored to have you. And we talked last night, and his story is something out of the books. And today is actually his birthday.
It's my birthday.
He's a 31-year-old, and with his life, you would think that he's 50. He's lived quite a crazy life, and so we're so excited to have you.
I'm pumped to be here. Glad to be here. It's awesome.
Well, thanks. Just to dive in,
Yep.
Your ancestry background is something else. And so why is the name Rosalie important to your story?
Yeah, I didn't think it would be. So my wife, when she was 16, 17, I think that was one of the names. If she had a girl, she wanted to name her Rosalie. So when we found out we were pregnant, we had a girl, that was the name. We were actually in Italy just doing we called it the baby moon. And she wanted to get something embroidered. And she's like, are we going to name her Rosalie? And we did. Well, the interesting part of that, the Italy, the name, all of that, is my mother was adopted by a Greek woman who was actually only in America because of an arranged marriage from Greece.
Okay.
And so she was married into a family in New York, pretty wealthy family, well-off family. From my understanding, was pretty unhappy in the marriage. Obviously, didn't get to choose, and obviously they were wealthy, and she had some benefits, but. One day, I think she was 19 or 20. One day, her mother-in-law at the time came to her and her doctor and said, hey, we have this child. We want you to raise her. And from my understanding, my yaya was kind of unhappy. And she was like, okay, like, yeah, it's great. Like, I would love to have something, right, that I can kind of pour into. And so the story that I've always known is that my mom was adopted by a Greek woman and that her father had passed away a month before she was born and that her parents weren't married or Catholic. I think it was they were Catholic. That was the story. And so they gave the child up for adoption. And that's how my yaya got her. And so the kind of crazy story of it all is my yaya didn't necessarily tell my mom she was adopted till later, which caused some issues in some ways. My mom meets her high school sweetheart.
And what is a yaya?
Yaya is like Greek grandma.
Greek grandma.
Yep.
Okay.
So I would growing up, I wished I was Greek because I had like this cool story of my yaya, but I wasn't. That was my blood relative, and she was awesome and crazy all in one. But her and my mom had conflict, because of all of those things. And I think my yaya was trying to do the best, and there's all sorts of reasons why that we don't know. My mom meets her high school sweetheart. They move to Utah. They were in New York, moved to Utah. She gets married, has 2 kids, and her first husband, Wes, gets killed in a motorcycle accident on State Street in Orem.
Oh my God.
So she's widowed at 19, 20 with 2 kids.
Can you imagine?
Have my dad, meets my dad. They have me. My parents were never married. And then my mom, from about the time 8 on, struggled with drugs and alcohol and lost custody of us. So we'll get to that part of the story after that. But so we knew she was adopted, but we lost contact with really my mom. She was everywhere. My yaya never would tell us anything, and she just told us kind of the same story. And so I searched family history, trying to figure out death records a month before my mom was born. We had a last name, but I think it was my actual biological my grandmother's last name, not the father's last name. So I was searching for the wrong person for years.
For years.
Because she
And
gave me
how
those
old,
names.
How old
So
were
this
you when you
was,
started
this
this?
is, I mean, I remember at probably 18, 19, like thinking about it, probably like as I got active in the church and LDS church. And so they talk about it a lot, but really it was after my mission. I served in LDS Mission, California. You know, you help in family history. And so somewhere in that, and I would have phases where I'd be all in and I'm searching everything and it just couldn't find anything. And in New York, they had some law where they sealed adoption records.
Okay.
And so you couldn't go unless you had, from my mother could technically go to the courthouse and get them unsealed, but I couldn't get her to go to New York. Obviously,
Yeah.
she's struggling. She's in and out of jail my whole life. And so nothing happens, like beating my head against the wall. And then when my wife was pregnant, we were 2 months before my daughter was born. I do the DNA ancestry, right? And I didn't do 20, I just did DNA ancestry. And
So this is like a couple years ago.
this
right?
is just 2 years ago. My daughter's 18 months. So
18.
this is just
Okay.
2 years ago. So for pretty much till I was 30, trying to figure this out. And I get all the results back. And it says that I'm a quarter Italian, which we thought that my mom was probably Italian. We just didn't know how much or what. And all of my relatives on the Ancestry app, people, I had cousins that I knew, but I shared more DNA with all these Italians. And there was the Zito family and all these families, and they were all related, and you could tell they were all related, and they had all the common connections, and you can see, oh, they're related to this person.
Yeah.
But they're not siblings, so they're cousins. And so I started just tracking down people, say, okay, I'm related to all these people. Now where's my grandpa in this? Like, where does it end? Where does he come in? And I directed maybe there was probably 8 to 10 names, and they all went back to the same set of, which would have been my great-grandparents. And they were a couple that came over from Sicily, 1900, 1910, somewhere around that time. And Joseph Zito was his name, and Jenny Lucchese was her name. Okay.
Some big
And
names.
yeah, some names. And so then I'm like, it's gotta be one of their kids. And so they had 6 kids. And so I start just going down each kid and trying to figure out where the pieces are. And I remember getting to one of the kids and seeing pictures that they had uploaded, and there was some women of the family that were in the pictures, and they looked really similar to my mom, like same facial features, same things. And I'm like, wow, this is the family. Like this is really close. But I couldn't figure it out. And there was one, it's funny how it is the last one. The last one on the list didn't have much information because whatever put it into the tree had his name as Patrick instead of Pascal, I think was his actual name. And so when I clicked into it and then didn't find anything, I had to go search, and then I found it through another connection. And the interesting thing is I found this guy, and I pull up, he passed away, and I look at his death literally a month before my mom was born. This guy had died. I'm like, this has got to be it. Like, this is it. My yaya had told me that he died in a auto accident. That's kind of it was on the freeway, and he died in this hospital, or and nothing mapped out. But in the obituaries where it got interesting, because it did say in the obituary, it didn't say he died in an auto accident. It kind of said he suddenly died, but he was an auto salesman.
Okay.
So then I'm like, okay, that makes sense. My great yaya heard that or whatever it was, and that's the story I knew. But I'm like, he died a month before. I'm related to him. Yeah. The chances, this has to be it. Like, there's no one this can't be. If I'm related to all these people. My mom came from this family. Yeah, I'm from this bloodline. So one of the family members that I talked to earlier when I got first connected, I kind of said, hey, do you know any stories about like adoptions in this family? Like my mom was adopted. We don't know. And he's like, nah, there's nothing. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So now I'm like, no, this is it. Like, I know this person is my grandfather. I just don't know how this fits and whatever. And the obituary was weird because it said, yeah, he was a member of the Catholic faith, was a leader. He had a wife. He was in his 50s. His wife was in his 50s. They had 3 or 4 children who were in their 20s. And so my mom, I mean, the chances of 2 50-year-olds having a child, not very likely. And so the only answer was he was having an affair, or they had another woman. And so that's where I was stuck at, because that didn't make sense. I mean, he was a family man, and there's these kids and all of these things. And so I reach out to that connection, which would have now I know is my half cousin. And it was the middle of the night, and my wife remembers because I was up all night just digging into it, right? And I remember I sent him a message and was like, hey man, I'm pretty sure we have the same grandfather, but we have different grandmas. Like, it has to be. This is the only thing that makes sense. It lines up perfectly. And I woke up 4 hours later to a paragraph from this guy that pretty much said, I don't know how you figured this out. This is deep family, like, history that no one talks about. I only learned about it when my dad was dying. His dad was dying of cancer, and they started talking about the family history. And he goes on to say, he wasn't an auto salesman. He was a front man. He had businesses from the mob and the mafia throughout all that time.
Businesses. So he's not just like a little guy in the mob or the mafia. He's like running shows.
He's running shows. And how he started running shows goes back to the great-grandparents. The great-grandparents, Joseph and Jenny, came from Sicily. And from what he told me in this message, it says they were asked to come from Sicily to New York. Chicago was being established. There were some, Italians that had moved there. And to start businesses in the Greenwich Village. And in 1918, somewhere around that time, Zito's Bakery was started in the Greenwich Village, which was my family's bakery that was started, and then more businesses were created.
Yeah. And for those that don't know about Zito's Bakery, like that's a pretty big name.
That
right?
was the big bakery there. It existed for all the time as all the businesses and all the Italians and all the Sicilians, they all came in from Italy. And that was, that's still the, Italian hub of New York, right? Like that's HQ. Yeah. So Zito's Bakery just up until like 10 years ago was still Zito's Bakery. And then it's still a bakery. They changed the name, but it's a New York monument of like a city monument of the Italians, of those that came in. And so it's like, man, okay, there's wild stories. And he goes, but you're Lucchese, and I've obviously heard of the Lucchese crime family. So you have the Zitos and the Lucchese, and if you Google it, because I have, it's like, okay, those families have been tied forever. And a lot of it's because of that marriage between Joseph and Jenny and then their kids. And so in there he said Joseph, so the great-grandfather, was actually asked to be the godfather of New Jersey.
The godfather of New Jersey.
Because they have a Zito's Bakery in New Jersey as well, right, that they started.
Yeah.
And that I'm second cousins with the founder of the New York Hells Angels, which is Chuck Zito, which was famously Pamela Anderson's bodyguard. So that's my family, like all in this. And so he said, but what I learned about my grandfather is that he died at the home of the woman he was having an affair with, which would have been my grandmother. Wow. And so that's why we have different grandmothers. And so he died, and he kind of made it weird, like how he died. We don't really know how he died. And so there's probably a whole other story in that.
Sounds like anything with the mob or mafia.
Yeah. And so from what it seems is, obviously the family was tied. I don't know if all the siblings, but it must have been that Patrick or Pascal, my grandfather, was the one still kind of in the business, in the family, running those things. And I don't know, obviously, the details. But if you Google the names, they've been incorporated, obviously, in that family for years and years and years. And there was still, like, you Google, like, 2 80-year-olds got in a fight that were in the families just, like, a couple years ago. Like, and so, but I think the crazy thing is my whole life, you just don't know. You don't know where you come from, and it just got bigger. But going back to answer the question. So I'm looking at the family history, and I'm just overwhelmed, texting my sisters. We're starting to get pictures. We're finding pictures of him, and his oldest kids, which are my mom's half siblings, look like my mom. Like, it's just crazy things that are happening. And then as I'm looking at the women in the line of the family, the name Rosalie comes up 6, 7, 8 times going back to Italy.
And this is what you named your daughter. This was what
we had already planned. We were in Italy when we decided to name her that. My wife has wanted to name her. I would have never thought of that name. That wouldn't have been the name. And she's a month from having Rosalie, and we find out, like, it's a straight family name. And you can tell it's a family name because there's Rose and then Rosalie. Like, they kept that name for a long period of time through those bloodlines.
So without even knowing.
No idea. The moment I know is a month before she's born. And what a special, like, I think moment for me of, like, obviously having a daughter that was going to be a special moment. It's like your family. You finally have, like, your own little family. Yeah. Especially you get married, it's one thing, and then you have a kid, and it's like, okay, that's the bloodlines and the family. And then to have the knowledge at that point, I think was really cool and almost special in that it took longer to know, but I'm glad it was now. And and it helps me have empathy for a lot of things, for my yaya. And now the story changes because I actually went to show her my yaya that we found it. She wouldn't even look at it.
Really?
Which made me actually have more empathy for her, because there's more to the story that she didn't let us know. And we don't know if that baby was trying to be saved, if they were hiding the baby. We have no idea now. We put the context on how did this baby end up with this 19-year-old, 20-year-old Greek woman that barely speaks English. Like, that doesn't make sense.
There's a big story
There's a
behind
story in this, and my yaya like didn't even look at it. Like, she wouldn't even. She's like, no, that can't be it. And I'm like, oh, is DNA wrong? Like, how is this could be? It can't be wrong.
This is factual.
Like, this is factual. Like, I'm related to these people, and this person died, and you said this, and this is like everything matches up. It'd be 1 billion to 1 chances of it not being, and if not, it'd be one of these kids or grandkids.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be somebody in there. So that story, it's interesting because my life early on was kind of chaos, right?
Totally.
Like, and not that this made it any more peaceful, but you start to see the
patterns, maybe?
patterns, and you start to see who we are. Like, we are, whether we were raised by people or not, through our DNA, through all these, like, we are our ancestors. Like,
Definitely.
that's what it is. And I think that's what I was searching for. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate my yaya or anything. I wanted to know what my family was.
Definitely.
I wanted to know what they went through. How did I get here? And what like the characteristics I have, the skills I have, like, what are they?
Yeah.
So it's wild to see. And then you dig into the mafia stuff. It's wild. I mean, my wife watched The Godfather like the next day, and like it's like the whole life we had no idea. And then to see the pictures, and you see pictures of my grandfather, and he looks like a guy to be in the mob, like dressed super nice. Like the night with all you could tell he's in pictures with politicians and people in the pictures that we found, and you're like, okay, this makes sense. And looks like me, actually looks similar to me in a lot more ways than even some of my other family members. So,
and if you think about like the mob, the mafia bosses, these are like the best networkers in the world. Yeah, and power, like top guys. Sure. And like with how far you've came at such a young age, like I'm really excited to dive into that.
For sure.
You mentioned something that's so important and can easily not be seen, but you were brought up in chaos, right? And so people have the choice when they're brought up in chaos to be a statistic or learn from it and grow. And so before we move on, like, tell us about that chaos a little bit, and what are a couple moments that kind of stuck with you?
Yeah. I think so. My mom kind of told that story. Is my mom, was widowed, met my dad. They weren't married. They moved to Florida to kind of get away from the other family, and they didn't stay together long. My dad lived outside the home, but paid for the home and me and my sisters to live with my mom for up until I was 8, 9. But my mom life tough for my mom. Like, I have more empathy, way more than I did at the time for her. And now knowing the story of this woman and what she went through, but drugs, alcohol, just on and on and on. And so at a young age, my sisters were old enough. I was kind of always with my mom, probably going to places and that I shouldn't have been. And like, I remember like, being kind of put in rooms, and they'd go out and party, and I was just always there, but I was the kid, and you don't recognize what's happening, and
this is just your normal world.
I don't know any better. I don't know any better, but there came a day, I remember it was the day after Halloween, because the night of Halloween, we had a little Jeep Cherokee that was repoed. And I remember maybe my mom made an excuse or something happened. And then, I'm a kid, like, we go out, and I remember coming back the next day, and I were waking up the next day, and my sister's bags were all packed at the door. And there was this woman there that I didn't know, and it was like somebody I felt like, can't remember if I knew her or not, but it was weird that they were all packed. And I'm like, what's going on?
And how old your sister is?
My sisters had got it. So I was 8 or 9, so they're 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that range. So, older, like they're middle school, about to get to high school. So they're packed up, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I didn't know we're going on a trip. Like, what's going on? And I don't remember if it was told to me then, but they were, Child Protection Services were called, and my mom lost custody of us. She didn't pay the bills. The car got repoed, and my dad was giving her money, and it just wasn't going to the home. and really the house ended up in that same situation, right? And so, crazy enough, like my sisters are gone, they're on a plane, so they're my half sisters, so my dad doesn't have custody of them, so they go live with their father's grandparents or their father's parents. And I remember my dad turning to me and was just like, hey, he moved kind of back in the home on the couch for the period of time. It was interesting. And he just said, we're going to move to Blanding. And
what was in Blanding?
Blanding, if you know about Utah, freaking hour south of Moab, 3,000 people, middle of nowhere, right? I was living in Tampa area. It's actually a little town called Newport Richey. It's closer to Clearwater Beach in those ways. And you only know what you know. And it's a beautiful little place. We went to the beach a lot, had a lot of fun.
So Blanding, Utah is just like your home in Florida.
Yeah, exactly. So all I remember is like right before Christmas, we get on a plane, we leave. I remember like leaving my mom. I think after the time I left, I maybe have seen her 6 or 7 times in my life since that day.
Really?
And life was just different. And we got on a plane, we landed in Salt Lake. It's another 5 hours down to Blanding. And it was snow and all of these things. And I got put into a home with 2 people in their early 70s that just were going to raise me now. And that's kind of what happened, like a completely shock, situation.
So with that, like your family just got split up
All
all over the United States.
My sisters went to Texas, and then they had custody battles with Utah. And so they were doing their whole thing for most of their, their teenage years. And I was thrown into Blanding, Utah, and this grandparent situation.
So what does that do to a little kid?
So
that's some big stuff.
At first, right, you're just trying to, at first it's kind of like, well, this is what it is. It's fun. It's a new experiences. You don't know, right? And then, reality sets in, and my father lived with my grandparents for a little bit, but you can't make a living down there. And so he moved up to Salt Lake area to get a job, and I probably could have lived with him, but he's like, you just need to live down here. Like, you need to do it. And that was the moment that he kind of was like, hey, you need to live down here. And that was probably, you go back to the moment, was like, all right, this has got to be it. Like, I'm in. Like, I got to grow up pretty much. And probably like 12, like at that time, right? And so I call it like survival mode is the only way to think of it. You become independent. You become independent. I didn't have any siblings. I had cousins around, grandparents. You just try to just. And I was telling you when we were talking is like, I think it's one of my strengths, but one of the weaknesses is like, I didn't want to be a burden. Like at some point, even though I was frustrated, at some point I was like, oh man, I can't burden these people. These 70-year-old people are burdened by me. My dad's burdened by, right? Like I don't want to be a burden anymore to people. And so the only other route is independence. Like I got to be independent. I got to function myself.
Which is so interesting. In like the short time we've known each other, something that's very obvious is really in depth who you are. And so to go from like feeling probably pretty worthless, feeling like you're kind of a burden to all these people
100%
for things that are completely out of your control, and you're just a little kid. And that I want to dive into, like and we'll dive into what really changed for you to know who you are. But what role did your grandpa play, and what type of legacy did he have?
That's exactly, like the word is legacy. I think when you talk about Morris Swenson, it's legacy. And so I was raised by grandparents, but I learned 2 things from each of my grandparents. My grandfather didn't raise me, really. My grandma took that responsibility. It wasn't even like, she didn't try to be my mom. She just did the best she could. Like, she taught me love. She took care of me, those things, right? Whether I appreciated it or not, she did. My grandfather, though, was kind of this legend. After he got home from Korea, I was asked to go down to Blanding to start a football program that they didn't have. And they're only supposed to be down there 3 years. They stayed for 50. He started the wrestling program. Like, he started all the programs. He united a lot of the Ute and Navajo tribes to come play on the schools teams because they were on the reservation. Wow. So he was just this individual who everyone that I talked to him has just got this smile, and he just impacted people's lives. He was a coach. He was the driver's ed teacher. He was just involved in these kids' lives. And so I didn't see that part. I got to see the end. I got to see the flowers that he got at the end of his life, where people would come knock on our door every day. Is Morris here? Is Morris here? I'm just in town. I want to stop by and see him. And people from all walks of life would come in. And I was just like, and we'd go places on travel trips and everyone knew him. But he also, like, looking back on it, and I'm like, he may have not known those people. He always was familiar with people, and I just didn't know if they knew him or not because he was talking to him. But people just knew who he was. He had an impact from a small little town. And at one point when I was really young, I was like, this guy's a celebrity. My grandma's a celebrity. Everyone knows him everywhere we go. Like, but he didn't. What I'm grateful for it is he taught me. This is the biggest thing: is that I saw how people admired. He was loved, and he had very little money to his name. And I think that was the first thing. It was like, no. I never, I think some people think, oh, I'm going to get money and then I'm going to get respect and I'm going to have legacy. I learned really quickly you didn't need that. Like he didn't have any of that, and he had a ton of legacy and he had a ton of impact.
So you figured out at a very young age that your grandpa has somehow built an insane legacy while not breaking through the threshold of financial freedom.
Sure.
But I feel like we live in an age right now where if you're going to have a legacy, like you got to be booming in business.
Yep.
And so with that perspective, what have you learned what does it really take to have an authentic legacy without money?
I think it's probably intent. Like so before he went to Korea, he got, obviously in the LDS church, you get a patriarchal blessing, which is like it's a prayer about your life and what it was. And when he got it the first time, it talked about how he would help young men and young women and sports and in these works. And then he went to Korea and he lost it. And he went back to try to get a new one and try to find it. And they're like, well, we can't find, like they didn't take record back then. I don't know what happened. And so they kind of gave him a new one, but it wasn't that. But I actually think if looking back, he was grateful because it motivated him, because he felt like, well, that's what he was supposed to do. And so I think he just truly believed, and maybe that's why he didn't care about money. Is like, oh, I have the opportunity. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help young men, young women. I'm supposed to help youth. And maybe that's just why he just said, all right, I'm gonna be a teacher. It's a decent, steady income, right? And he could coach. And, they had 6 kids, and they lived in a small town, and I didn't know how real poor we are until like the first couple months living with my grandparents. And my grandma, like, I was about to get in the shower or something, she gave me a bucket, and she's like, plug the drain when you're done showering, bucket out the water to the garden. Like, I'm like, we didn't have to do that in Florida. Like, it was just a completely different change of life. So they lived within their means, but he spent 60, 80, 90 hours a week just coaching and being with the kids and making trips to the reservation and having kids sleep on their floor. My grandma would make them breakfast. Like, they just were in it for their whole lives, and both of my grandparents. And I think that's why they just didn't care about money probably the same way. It's like their impact was there. That was their impact. They were there. They were going to dig in. And he was the first person inducted into like the San Juan High School Hall of Fame. He's in the state of Utah Hall of Fame. Like, he made an impact in this small area, and every single one of his kids said the same thing. Like, they all had to just live in the shadow, but in a good way, of their father. And I it was about Morris. It was about who he was, and as he got older, he wasn't the same coach, maybe motivator wise, but he was the guy that everyone would be around. And so people would come to me all the time and like just talk to me about my grandfather. Like, it's just who he was. But I think it was a little bit of, I think maybe it's not a hero complex, but he wanted to give. And I think it was intent. And I think it wasn't on accident. He wasn't doing it passively. Like, he was doing it to take care of people. Yeah. And that's how he got fulfilled. And my grandma, towards the end of her life, is literally jokingly, it's the cliche thing. He's like, your grandfather's never worked a day in his life. She joked, she said, because I've taken care of everything else. But he has just done what he's always wanted to do. And I think it started at those times, probably in Korea, in those times of his life. But he grew up really poor. The Swensons and the Garmans owned the orchard south of Timpanogos, right here. So he lived right here on 1600 North in Orem down there, and but they were poor. And so I don't know what made him want to have that legacy or not, or if he wanted to, but he had it at the end of his life.
Well, I think your grandma said something that's so insightful. One of the biggest regrets that people have in life is not caring about their own legacy and their own purpose, and they kind of do everything for other people.
Yep.
And I think that there's an interesting mix and outward mindset of helping and adding value to everyone.
Yep.
But it sounds like your grandpa knew his purpose and his intent was there.
Yep.
And it was fulfilled.
Yep.
To the max.
To the max.
Yeah.
And he did it well into his 80s. He did it like his whole life. When he stopped coaching, he learned how to drive a bus, so he could be on the bus trips. He didn't want the same stress of coach, but he still wanted to be around the kids.
Yeah.
Like I switched from football to golf my sophomore year. He was the football guy, and that was scary to tell him. And he became my assistant golf coach. Like he was just, that's who he was. I think that probably at some point it's like all he knew, and it probably just kept him in there too because it's all he knew. But that was huge. I think my grandma taught me love, and she took care of me, and she was that kind of the stable part, even though I was very independent and did my own thing. But he just gave me somebody to look towards.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he has something that the other people don't have that I get to be around.
Yeah.
And some of my friends' grandparents, like they kind of, but they don't have what he has. And I got to kind of live with him and see it on a daily basis. So that increased my vision in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Probably, at least set the tone of what probably could have been if I would have stayed in the situation with my mom. And that is like, I got a second chance, even though when I was young, I thought, man, I'm in a weird, who has grandparents, and it's awkward when your grandma's coming to all the activities, and you just feel, you feel insecure about it, and you don't want people, I didn't want people to know that my mom was in jail or my mom was this. Like, I just wanted to hide it, and it was hard to do that when you got these 70-year-olds that are always like your parents, right? And so people just know, it's kind of your identity a little bit of like who you are. But as I got older, I think, it just become less, I think I got less insecure, and going back to like finding who I was, it's just that journey of like being insecure is the start of it, and then working through and just being okay with who you are first, and then starting to truly see your strengths. Like, what do you have? And then go magnify them. And I think so much probably early in my life was the weaknesses, whether it's personal weaknesses, family weaknesses, the things that the chaos that's not happening right. And I think what I've realized, you started to realize, like, just focus on your strengths. Like, what strengths do you have? But you have to identify them first. Yeah. And usually it's hard to identify them in yourself. Other people have to start telling you, hey, you're good at this. Hey, you naturally do this.
That's interesting.
And it's not common for everyone to do that to people, but I think some of the best friends in the world, like the people that should be around you, are the ones that should be mirrors of yourself, right? You should be able to look to them to get that guidance because they see you in a way that you can't see yourself, right? And I think that's a huge part of figuring out who you are. Is your friends, because they're the ones that see, or your parents, or anybody, your teachers, your coaches, all of those people are those people that actually can see the things that you don't see in yourself. So
I think that's amazingly said. It's really hard to understand where our own belief and what we think of ourselves comes from. And there's kind of a cool quote, and it says, "I'm not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. We live in a perception of ourselves."
Yes.
So let that sit in.
100%.
It's this cycle where and it's like we need people that mirror us and will tell us these things. And if you have the negative ones, like you can be brought down pretty quick. And then the vice versa, say you bring in those people that bring you this positive energy and boost your energy. Yep. Those are the winners that you need around you, and where your belief system goes through the roof. And that's it. It's belief. It's hope. It's people that can give you hope of what you can become. Yeah. I think that's, if anything, no matter what chaos of life towards the, getting older, 18, getting out of high school, is like, I started to have that glimmer of hope. Like, okay, like there's some things that could have went really wrong. Some things did go wrong, but things started to go more right over time. And that hope is that driving factor of like progression. Like, okay, I can get better. I can do better. I can do more. Totally. And that's a huge part of it all. For people to reach levels, and it's crazy that we haven't dove too much in your world yet, but I think your backstory is unreal, but I've been itching to get to you.
Yep.
And so with that, you've grown to have an insane belief in yourself. And guys, this guy gets in situations and gets with tables with people that are, are not normally hanging out with 30-year-olds.
Sure.
And
Sure.
billionaires.
Sure.
You made a subtle comment that there's times when you've been on a private jet with international politicians, and so it's like, how do you get to that point? And I want the audience to know who you are, because on the outside, when people can look you up on Forbes or wherever, it's like, hey, this guy's just a baller in business, and he's executed well in life.
Sure.
But who is Shay? What's your purpose? What's your why? What do you care about?
I think that's what goes. Why is good. I think Simon Sinek is a huge person, but it goes back. So I went on a mission, and that's when it like amplified. I think my grandparents allowed me to survive and probably saved me from what my life could have been. And it got me to that moment where you're an adult and you got to make decisions, and had to kind of come to Jesus moment. Went on an LDS mission. And on top of the spiritual increase that I had in many ways, I got to live and got to serve under Larry Gelwix, who people remember. There's a rugby movie called Forever Strong. Coach Gelwix is a legendary in the rugby world. 410 wins, 10 losses in 36 years. Made a Hollywood movie about him. He, has a business of his own, speaker. I've traveled with him to the MLB to speak to winter meetings. I've been to the Houston Astros with him. I've got to see, but he was my mission president when I first met him. And on top of being an incredible mission president, who he was, obviously, he also was humble enough. Like, some leaders are like, hey, I'm the guy. He's not. He's like, hey, let's bring more. And then all of a sudden, I didn't know who this woman was. This woman named Liz Wiseman comes to our mission and trains us at a leadership meeting. And then to find out, she has a New York Times best-selling book, and she costs X amount of money to work with this business, tens of thousands of dollars. And she came 4 times on my mission.
Wow.
Greg McKeown, New York Times bestseller, phenomenal business leader, all these things too. I think he's wrote 2 New York Times bestsellers now. Like, he came 4 times my mission. And then me and Liz developed a relationship after the mission. Wow. Like, this kind of all went to this moment. Everything led up to like that 19 to 21-year-old where I felt like I was just surrounded by the greatest people that I'd been around collectively. Like, not just one, my grandparents were awesome, but like just from different aspects of the world. And I think identifying, like you said, like, how do you know yourself? I wasn't intimidated by them. And what I loved about them is, as I got to know them and Larry, like, they're just normal people. And my grandpa was a normal person. Like, I saw who he was. He was a normal guy. But like, and so I think that started a little bit more of the belief of like, oh, it is so hard to do, but it's not because of who you are. And it's like, you can be that person. Just people don't have the belief they can. They don't execute on that. And so I think as I met all those people and they put me into rooms. So Liz Wiseman, one of these rooms that happened, I reach out to her, we connect. She says, hey, I'm speaking as the first keynote Silicon Slopes. So when Silicon Slopes was started, she was the first keynote speaker. Yeah. And she said, hey, I'm in town speaking at this conference. You should come. Great. She's like, let's go to lunch as well. So I'm like, cool. I get to go meet up with her. She's awesome. I walk in. Corrine Clark was there. Some politician was there. I'm sitting at the dinner table with all these like very high important people. I'm right off my mission. I'm nothing, right? Like, I have nothing. And she didn't treat me like a kid. She just treated me like them. Yeah.
I got to stop you right there because in that moment we think we are nothing, but you've always been Shay Swenson from when you were born. It's just when you acknowledge who you are.
100%. And be okay within that, and knowing that they all started somewhere too. And you start to hear these stories of who they are, and they're like, oh, like, I can see myself in them. I can see at least pieces of myself in them. I am my own self, and there's going to be a different story that I write. But like, no, I'm right on track. Yeah. Where like early in my life, I thought I was behind. I thought I didn't have what everyone had. I thought I was behind, and then I feel like that mission just accelerated. By the time I got home, I was like, I'm ahead. Yeah, like, I'm ahead of everything, and that on my mission, I studied the doctrine of faith. And it's interesting because the business world has it too. But like, I think in the LDS culture, it's like faith without works, right? And some of the other, it's like belief. And I sort of realized like it's both. It's not one, actually. Like I think sometimes we are told too much action and not enough belief. Where if you just too much belief and not action, there's neither work. But faith, and it's interesting because it applies to all these business leaders and what they may call it something different. They may acknowledge God, they may not. But it's vision and expectation, right? And effort.
Yeah.
Like that is faith. And then I think
That's
intents
power.
where it's different, right? Charity, and that's the more spiritual side. But even in a business side, with vision and then the effort to achieve that vision, you can do whatever. And so Grant Cardone calls it, right? He has a 10x effort, 10x vision. And so he said, I had 10x effort my whole life. I was a hustler. Like I sold cars, I worked hard. Like I grew up with a lot of people that I knew that were freaking hard workers. No one could ever tell them that they didn't work hard. But you think that's enough, and it's not enough. That's the hard part. That's the discipline that you need. But the other part is that belief and that perfect brightness of hope, or that vision that, oh, I can do anything. I have what I have, and now I can do anything. And that's what people call it, the law of attraction. I just think it's those two things.
Yeah.
It is you have this belief, and your brain and obviously God, and the way I believe is things start to align because you believe it's possible. But it's not in this like crazy, like magical way. It's just the way your effort then drives your vision, your effort, and your vision, your effort. And if your vision is just unlimited, and with the belief of God, I'm like, well, I'm not going to doubt him in any way. Like we're going to have that. And so I developed that kind of hope, like nothing, I'm going to be unstoppable, not because of necessarily even me, but like I trust that things will work out. And that's all these other people did. It's all they did. Gary Vee calls it dirt and clouds. Like you have to be in the dirt, right? Every day, hustle and be patient. But you also have to hustle, and then you have to have this vision that it's both. And in that kind of almost contradiction of short, long term is how somebody's built. It's in the grind, in the vision, and the grind, in the vision, and over time you build. And even as I saw in other ways, when people lose hope, right? And it may start one way. They lose hope because of circumstance, so their effort drops. Sometimes their effort drops, so then their hope drops, right? Like there's times in which, and so I used to joke with the missionaries on my mission, is like when they were struggling, it was either one of two things. Like, do you not have the hope, like the belief anymore, or is it the work? Yeah, right? Like what went wrong first? Because one of them went first. Yeah. And then you went down the line, right? And so we have to increase hope. I think that's one of the gifts I think my grandfather had, that all these people have, is I can't teach you how to work hard. Like we can show you, but I think you can inspire.
That's what your grandpa did too.
Yep. But I think you can give people hope. And I think the way you give them hope is not fake. It is telling them who they are. It's helping them see who they are. Like, hey, you can do this. Right? And they have to still follow up on it. Yeah. But that's the only thing I think we're required to do for people, is like give them hope. And so we have to have it if we're going to give it. And that's why I love it. Like hope will be like if I write a book, it'll be about hope, because I think it's, at least in the culture that I grew up with, like work is so important, which I'm glad I have that too. But I think getting into the rooms, getting into those situations, you have to have a stupid amount of hope. And that you should be in there. And I've been in crazy rooms with people. My wife jokes and laughs, and it keeps getting more and more and more. But it's not the same. Before it was like a thrill a little bit. Yeah. Now it's just like, they're just people, and they all have problems. And
so you kind of took them off their pedestal a little bit.
Yeah, and that they really, and some of them maybe put themselves on there. We put them on there. They just worked.
That's our belief on them.
That's exactly. So and you meet some of these people, and you're like, wow, these are just like normal humans, right? Like they have their own issues and their ways, but when you break that barrier with people, and that's that networking side, when you can break a barrier with people, they put up a frame, especially whether it's an athlete, a politician, a high net worth person. They have a frame. We may think like, oh, they're stuck up or this, but they have a wall up because they know what they have or they know what people are trying to get from them.
Yeah.
But when you can communicate with them like a normal person and actually share common experiences, even though they're in a different world than you are, they actually open up more than anybody.
Yeah.
Because it's actually rare for them to open up because they are closed. And so I think it's a lot easier to get into those rooms. One, you just have to have the self-awareness to know, like, I'm not necessarily any better than they are, but I'm not any worse than they are.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just who I am, and I deserve to be in the room anybody else.
I think the last 10 minutes have been huge for anyone watching. And one, we hit on belief, like the power of belief mixed with work. I believe it's I don't remember which prophet who says it, but pray as if everything depends on God, and then work as if everything depends on yourself.
Yep.
And then mesh those together.
Yep.
Crazy powerful.
100%.
And if you believe you can achieve something and it's good works, positive works, there's no reason, if there's a God that loves us, that he would not help us if we have the faith and we're going to put in the work.
Yep.
I think that's so big. And for anyone lacking work ethic or the hope and the faith that they can achieve whatever, go listen to those 10 minutes. He just put it on a platter for all of us. And then we're going now into the networking world and framing. There's so many people that they see, a billionaire or they see someone like that and they're like, I have no playing room here.
Yes.
Like, I don't belong here. What advice would you give them to, like, how can you break those frames as a normal person talking with someone who you feel like is not a normal person?
Number one is that you can't treat them. So like if you treat them like you're a fan, they will always treat you like a fan. Number one. So if I'm talking to an athlete, right? If some kid comes up to Patrick Mahomes or whatever, every single person that says that same thing, they're going to that's a fan.
Yeah.
Because he gets asked the same question every time. He gets asked the same, question. For that person, it's new. For him, he gets it every day. And so how am I different? Well, not that I'm not a fan of him, but I'm not a fan that way. But what other things is he interested in? He has to talk about football all day long.
Yeah.
What else does he like? What else does he do? Talk about his family. Talk about, there's so many different ways you can get to people, because go to the things you relate with them on, not the things that they're great at. They get told that every day if they're those types of people. I got to meet John Huntsman before he passed senior, right? Billionaire, philanthropist, all these things. I met his daughters when I was serving.
Legacy.
Awesome. At the end of his life, talking about legacy, at the end of his life, I got to go to his house a couple times. But the time I remember, this had been 2 years before he passed. His house is interesting. It's a big home, but it feels like grandma's home still, which is interesting. It's big, but it still feels like a normal home. Like, it was comfortable. It wasn't like, this is weird. It was comfortable. And I got to sit with him. And of all the things he's done and all the places and all the money and all the things, we sat and we talked about, he wanted to know about my family. He wanted to know my family history. He wanted to know about my mission. And we spent most of the time talking about his time, I believe in the 80s, when he was a mission president. That's
Really?
all he wanted to talk about. Right? Where these moments, his family, where not just his family he created, but who he came from. And then those moments when he was serving God or he was serving in this philanthropy way. That's what he wanted to talk about. It wasn't about the business and the $1 billion and the McDonald's deals and all of those other things. It was completely different. And that's, maybe I would have wanted to talk about business and those things and get it, but he didn't. And so you talk to them about what they want to talk about, because you'll learn actually. You can find everything else about them online about those other things.
Yeah.
The business stuff, they've given a book, they've given a talk, it's out there. Their truths are out there, at least from the business side. You don't know who they are. And if you can do that and you be comfortable in those situations and they feel you're comfortable, you're in. And once you meet one, you meet another. And you treat them, but you take care of them. Like, it's crazy because like, oh, they're a billionaire, they're this, they don't need anything. No, they do. Most of those
so
people
how
are
do you
giving
think-
their whole life. Like we think they're taking. A lot of them lives is giving their whole life. Yeah, they've made a bunch, but they're giving to family and resources and all. They're constantly giving those subtle things, which obviously you can't win them over with money. But I think gift giving, so you're talking about networking and connecting, knowing how to be a great gift giver is a way to somebody's heart. And it tells them that you aren't just somebody else that's trying to get something from them, but you are thoughtful enough to do the research, to know what they care about. Not what you think they care about, but what they truly care about. And you have to do digging for that. And I think that's the preparation that you have to do when you're trying to network with people. I joke, somebody asked me, so I came back to Utah. I was like away for 5 years, helped build a wealth management firm, came back, and I felt like for 5 years I didn't do as much networking. I was just in the profession. I came back, was in the profession, and about a year ago, I feel like I let it loose again. And I've been told, like Dave Allred's a great guy, runs Axia Partners. Every time I see him, he goes, dude, you're omnipresent. How are you everywhere? You are everywhere. And I'm not everywhere, but I'm in the places that matter. And I know the places that matter. And I know the places where people think, oh, there's a big event going on in this big conference, I should go to that. Nope, that's not the event that matters. There's subtle events that matter when you can actually impact and connect with people. But you have to.
So with that, I think a lot of people don't know those subtle little events. And how does the public be able to learn of those or know?
Social media, because of it. And I don't know how they did it before, I'm sure, but it was different all the way around. But social media, as you start to follow people and understand what they do, what they like, their business side, but they like snowboarding, they like these things. You put yourself in those positions where they're going to be, right? But you can't just take from them. You have to go with the intent of giving them value. What do they need? It's the Gary Vee, right? Give, take.
Yeah.
Give, take. So in networking, a lot of networking is too many people are like networking for sales. Like I'm networking to get a sale. That's not networking, that's sales. That's lead gen and sales. That is not networking is relationships. Relationship is not a transaction. Relationship is a relationship that is a barter over time.
Yeah.
Not a transactional moment. Right? Like, and you realize like Aaron Wagner, that was Dave Allred's partner. I've got to know a lot about Aaron and got to know about his business, got to know about these things.
His daughter's golfer.
She's gonna be an awesome golfer. She's great in all these ways. But what I got to know about Aaron is how he's relationship. My sister-in-law was needing a car for her wedding. I had a Turo of a nice car. They canceled it, tried to get another one, canceled it. So I just sent a message out to like the world and I'm like, hey, anybody have a car? Like I'll rent it, whatever. This is Aaron. Sends me a text. Hey, my Rolls Royce Ghost is in my brother's garage. Here's the code. Here's the keys. Take it.
Wow.
That was built because of a relationship over time. And I value what he's taught me. And I've been able to help him maybe in a couple ways and in some of those ways. But like you have to have the intent of the relationship and you have to find a way to pour value into that over time. But to even get to that point, you've got to know human behavior. You've got to have a deep empathy of people. And I joked with you, and I can get in a room, and this is where it's weird. I was in an event. I can get in a room, and I can tell you who the alpha in the room is.
Yeah.
I just know it. And it's not the biggest person. It's not the smallest. I can tell you because you can see how an environment, especially when there's a lot of people, how people gravitate around people, subconsciously or consciously. Right? The UVU president, I can't remember her name. That woman's an alpha. Little tiny woman, that woman's an alpha. Like everywhere she goes, whether she's you can see people gravitate to her. And so I've been able to see that. I can see in a room who, and even if I don't know who they are, I know, okay, that's the person. Yeah. I need to, but now I got to create a scenario in which it's less awkward for me to meet them.
Yeah.
And that's the game of starting to connect with people, is you create those scenarios or create the coincidence that seems like a coincidence, but it was thought out.
Strategic.
It was strategic that I built with them to make them comfortable so that they would give me a shot to be able to have that conversation so that they could get to know me and my intent and what I wanted as well. And that relationship was important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your ability around empathy.
Empathy's
And,
huge.
and I think I was asked a question, and I was in a group of friends. If you could have one superpower, it is empathy.
Empathy,
You can
100%.
level with everyone. And it's definitely any advice I would ever give is to dive deeper and understand empathy on a better level.
Yep.
And the more trials and hardships I've gone through in life has helped me level with people that I would have never been able to touch. And so I think full circle moment, like starting in your chaos,
Yep.
drove you to for sure have this empathy that you've gone through what most people could ever imagine, and you've been able to have those real vulnerable conversations that's different.
Yep.
And it makes you stand out, and they remember you. And then the power of giving, so big, and the
Yep.
outward mindset that your grandpa showed.
Yep.
And giving, there's a reciprocation that comes. And
100%.
with everything, as we kind of tie down a little bit, we got to talk about philanthropy. And so what does that mean to you, and why do you care about it?
Because I think my grandfather, what he did was philanthropy it was his time, right? So it was his time that was his source that he could give. He didn't have the money at the time. Larry Gellix didn't have the money at the time. There's people that have maybe both. They have money and they have time. I think, going back a little bit more spiritual, when I went through the temple, LDS temple the first time, one of the promises that you make, and it's a simple promise, but it's the law of consecration. And that was a subtle moment in my life, is like, what does that mean? Like your times, your talents, your gifts, right? Like, well, is that now? Is that when do they request that? Like, do I have to just do this forever? And it was like in this conundrum, and now it's become more and more clear, is like, that's why I was telling you when we were on the phone, like, money doesn't motivate me. It's interesting. I'm in wealth management. I help people with money. But one of the most frustrating things with people, and actually about a year ago, I went home to my wife just like really frustrated with my clients. Clients that had saved, they'd raised beautiful families, they'd raised money, they have all this money. And I can run the reports, they're never running out of money. And for me, right, and maybe it's just naive, but for me, I'm like, man, they have now the greatest resource. May not have the ability anymore or the energy the same way, but they have resources. Like, I look at their money and I think, oh my, what like they could do with it. And not even for other people, like what I know it would do for them. It would change them. And so money has been, obviously, it's like Simon Sinek calls money's a fuel of innovation. You have to have money. You have to get into the rooms you have to build something, and you have to show competence in something. You can't just go around trying to help, and you can do that, but there's levels that you'll get stuck into without doing it. But like the skill of the superpower of like empathy and connectors is being able to I have to have a profession. I got a wife. I'm going to have a family. I've got a baby. I got all these things. So I have to have money, and it's important. And it is a part of stewardship to make money and to do those things. But I joke with people. I'm like, I don't care about it. Like if somebody just said, hey, you're taken care of. Like you're going to live this life. Like you're going to have this medium house and this medium car, but you're going to be able to have the freedom to do whatever you want to do. Like that would be the best life I could possibly have. And what would I do that with is giving. Because in a selfish way, I feel really good. Like it makes me feel my mission. I joked with people, my mission ruined me in that way because I've been seeking for that fulfillment the entire time. But you can't just do it like the mission where it's all day, because you got to build a business or you got to make money. Like there's some works that you have to do to build up, sacrifice you have to have. And now it is, and my whole intent is I got to build these things, build these relationships, because one day God may need them. And when we need something, I have the resource. I may not have the resource, but I know the person who does, or I know that person that does. Like that's a connector's role, is to be able to, when stuff happens, who do we need to call to get the thing done? Not I need to make the most money. Now there's people that we need to do that. Go make a lot of money. Yeah. That is an important, like if you're building a board of a company or a nonprofit, somebody on that board's got to be loaded. I believe that. You got to have money. Somebody that has money. Somebody that knows how to make money. Connectors. Like you don't need the same type of person.
Yeah.
You need the strengths of that person. And Malcolm Gladwell calls in any big movement, right? So you have connectors, you have mavens, and you have, I think, salespeople, right? And so in any big movement, he did the studies, is like, you need connectors. That's what brings people together. You need mavens, people that are critical of things. There's people that give him a ruse. My wife's a maven. She's critical of things because she expects a high level of something,
Which is amazing.
right? And then somebody to sell that vision of that. And I'm a connector, and I think I have good vision as well. Not a maven. I don't think I've ever given a review on anything in my life, right? That's not what I do. But I'm a connector, and I do believe that you have to strengthen that. And so some of it isn't to have a gain. Sometimes it's not to like gain something anymore.
Well,
I'm far from that. I don't need people anymore the same way for me, but I may need them for somebody else.
Yeah.
That's what I don't know. And that's what usually happens. Like the other day, somebody called me, something happened. Boom, 2 phone calls, problem fixed, right? I didn't get anything from it, but I had inputs and I found outputs that fix problems, right? That's the beauty of that. So you have to have intent. Like if it's just to go get connected with these people to make money, that's just sales. Like that's not relationship.
It's so shallow.
It's just shallow. And that's, if you're just doing the job, that's fine. But that's, I think people are like, I got to be a network to good sales. So, no, you just have to have good relationships. Yeah. And what is a good It's care. How do you build a good relationship? Why are we friends with the people we're friends with? It's because we care at least somewhat about each other. Yeah. And if it's a means to an end, it will only ever be a means to an end. And it won't be worth much at the end of the day. There won't be somebody you can call. Right? And that's true networking, is that, yeah, we may have traded on money or ideas or those things, but regardless of that, we're going to take care of each other.
Yeah.
And so but it's built, and it's, you've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to be okay with not having money. That's, once again, I love it. I love that I have that. And that was from my grandfather, that I didn't need that, because I knew that you didn't have to have it to become it. But you do have to have value.
Definitely.
If you don't have money, you better still have value, though. And you
bring something.
You have to bring something to the table. And that's what I would say, the billionaires, they don't need money. That's actually the easier people to connect with if you think about it. They don't need your money. But what is going wrong in their life? Because as good as things are on one side, there's something else that's not going right. Fill that need. You'll be an ally to them for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And what a great mentor and friend to have, is a billionaire who can, he's got buttons everywhere that
can fix problems, not your problems, but other people's problems.
Definitely.
That make him feel good, because he trusts your opinion of that situation.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine some people actually, to have all the money in the world, I actually have empathy for that person. Who do they take care of? What does God expect of them? Yeah. It's a very difficult task. Somebody has $1 billion, like Ryan Smith. It's crazy. You could be like, oh, he's got $1 billion. What? That is not necessarily.
What a responsibility.
What a freaking responsibility. I don't know. Me and my wife had a conversation about that. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know how he feels, that responsibility, right? Because you got, well, give it all away.
Yeah.
Or do you give it all away? I don't know. But, right? And I actually, weirdly enough, from the spiritual side of tithing, the Christian side of tithing, is like, I actually thought, wow, what a blessing. I used to always think of tithing, you think about kind of the poor side, right? Like there's the blessings. But actually, for people that have built wealth, what a blessing it is to actually be pretty clear with what you're supposed to be doing.
Interesting.
And obviously when you're asked to do other things, but your expectations already been set. And then, you're open and willing to give when somebody needs it. Definitely. But you don't feel that burden. Yeah. And weirdly enough, I can't imagine what he feels like, because what a responsibility. That's something I think people think they want. I truly don't think it would make, you have to have the skills he has, that he probably acquired it, to be able to handle it. The stewardship of it.
That's a headache to even think about, the responsibility of a billionaire. And there's endless mistakes that you could make. Yep. And the stakes are so high on how much value you could give to people, that's so much pressure.
And you can ruin people's lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Just as much as you can save people's lives, you can ruin. That money you gave, you think you saved them, it may have ruined them. You have to play God. That's the hard thing. That's God. Some of the greatest people in the world came from poverty, right? So it wasn't good that God gave them everything. It was good that he gave them very little. because they became more. Right?
That's
So just
powerful.
giving something, it doesn't fix
Yeah.
anything because it's not progression. You didn't earn it.
Yeah.
Now, if it gets you in a position so you can get in a position to progress, different story. But if that's not the intent from the beginning, it doesn't serve anything. If anything, it's going to go the other way.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough, right? Like I don't, those are the answers that we don't know. But progression, hope, works, progression. People ask me, they're like, what do you believe? Like religion, like, oh, you're a Mormon or you're LDS or this. And I was like, in the core of it, I believe in progression. That's it. Just progression. So everything, whether it's scriptures, whether it's all these things, are helping me go from here to here to here. And my only way I progress is actually helping everybody else. That's the only way we progress, because that's all Christ did was do it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter all the other things. That's great. We learn. We can have all the doctrinal talks and those things. But I truly believe if he's a father and heavenly father, then he wants us to progress. And these are the tools. Here's the guidance. Here's the rules. Play the game. And Coach Pope on Casey Baugh's podcast, he said, I think it was, I don't know who, it was a famous individual, is the quote. It was like, I'd rather be ashes than dust.
What do you
Right?
think that means?
The way I take it is dust is people that don't do anything, right? They waste their time here. Meaning I would rather get up and burn and be ashes than just be dust. Like I would rather go for it.
Give it your all.
Just go. And that's the case, like just go. And that's the life he's given us. If there's a redeemer, it's to do that. It's actually to be okay with the ashes.
Wow.
Right? Like go, like truly go, and then have the hope, because he wants you to do it.
Yeah.
And not for you, but for what the impact you may be able to have once you realize that it's only to help people in those cases. So it's all that. Like when people ask me the core, like, why do you do all this? And there's like day-to-day things like, oh, we got to make money. We got to have a business. We have employees. We have all these things. Like there's day-to-day, it's like the Gary Vee dirt stuff. But like if somebody said, well, what's it all for? I'm like,
Why?
well, it's for that. Like there's going to be a moment of consecration that I'm going to say, hey, these are my talents and my gifts. And I was given 10 talents and here's 10. Like I multiplied it. And now we can use it, right? At some point. And so that's probably the day like really changes, like, okay, what's consecration mean? And I feel like the Lord at time has let me just go be. And then there's times where he's been, all right, I need you to do this. And then it's go be, and I need you to do this. And I've been okay with that. And I've just said, and he's been okay with me doing those other things. Like it doesn't have to be so in it every day. And because it's Ryan Smith and one of his things, it's like there is no such thing as balance.
Yeah.
Like it's just a plane that's going one way or the other. But because you went this way, you built this strength or this other thing that helps you. Like
on the other side.
if you're just dust, you're dust. Like you're not going to bring any value to people. And so it's got to be chaotic. You got to live in chaos. Like it's controlled chaos, but
That's beautiful.
You have to live in chaos.
Chaos is beautiful.
It allows you to, because when stuff hits the fan, you have to be able to live in that, right?
Yeah.
When trials come, whether it's poverty, whether it's losing a kid, whether it's whatever it is, injury, like who are you? And if you're not built in chaos, then you don't know how you're going to react, right? And Martin Luther King, great quote on that too. So I think it all goes back though, is we are the grandkids of our grandpa. Like we are that bloodline that comes through, and I think that's what legacy is for me, is whatever I am in my life is because of my grandparents and my father and the people that were there, right? Like, and I hope that same thing goes on and on. Because, probably 100 years from now, there may be people in 30 years from I'm gone that know me, but over time, the hope is that you instilled the next generation and
Definitely.
they became who they wanted to be, right? And your legacy does go, but it may not be your name, but it's the disciplines, it's the things that you hopefully passed on through the generations that are still there, that
Amazing.
are founded, that started somewhere in that. So I think it's even what you guys are doing of trying to capture legacies and try to capture those things. I think the more we can do that, the more we understand ourselves, because we start to look deeply in other people and their stories, and that's empathy, and knowing And I think empathy for ourselves of like, hey, I made a mistake, but I have empathy of why. This was what I was going through, and that's why I did that. Doesn't mean it was right, but I have empathy for myself and I have empathy for others because life's hard and stuff happens, right? It's just not perfect. So
you've articulated so many crucial points in such a clean way that there's no way if people are watching this podcast, they do not have their notes out. And if you didn't, literally go back and just listen to what he just said. And I really like how to level with a billionaire. Amazing. I think you also touched like how to level with God and how to add value, the power of consecration, what really matters. And just to end the episode, it's literally your birthday. We're so grateful for your time here. It really does mean the world, and your focus and how you come to the table is beautiful. And you've done a great job at what you've done, and I'm honored to be with you. And to end, we were talking about like, who knows what our posterity is going to be like and do.
Yep.
If you could have a couple things that you would wish for your posterity more than anything, what would that be?
I think it's to, number one, be equipped to the life they're going to live. What we live in today, our kids are going to go through something different, whether it's easier or harder, and we don't know what that will be. I think the biggest thing I want of like my daughter, I guess I can say, is like Rosalie is that in this world, she's going to have to be freaking strong. And I think the only way to be strong is just to be really self-aware, like really, really self-aware, being okay with the faults and the weaknesses and the things she's not good at and the things she won't ever really be good at, but to double down on strengths. I think if my posterity would, if I could leave anything, is just go all in on your strengths. I believe those are the gifts. And I believe that as you're in your strengths, not all, but most of your weaknesses will be taken care of, or they'll be minimized. Or why we need people, you bring those people in your life that cover those areas, and so that there's strengths. And I hope that the posterity, that they would do that, because there is not one answer of who do we become. It's who they're supposed to become. And I think that's what I wanted the posterity, and that hopefully my grandfather's legacy just continues to go down, that it is about the people. It's about the people. It's always been about the people. It's God says it's about the people. So if we can stay in that, even during tough times, I think that's a great posterity. And to know that you don't have to be perfect in any of this stuff. That's why we're here. We can be ashes at times, and we can try it again and again and again. And that's the beautiful thing that I believe in, like I have hope in. The ultimate thing I have hope in is we have that opportunity to do that. And no matter how low we've been or where we've been or who we were, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because we have a shot. And I think God through all Holy Writ has explained that. Doesn't matter who you were. You were always who, like you said, there was something in you the entire time. Your actions may not have shown it at times, but you can become it, but you have to believe it. So hopefully they will. Like that's the goal, and give them hope that they can achieve it, but they have to do it themselves. Right? So
man, that was amazing. I think you're so well spoken, and
appreciate it.
Super grateful that you came on today on such a special day, and beyond grateful for what you've said today. And that is going to be a wrap on the Life Legacy podcast today. Shay, thank you.
Love it. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.